Hi, I'm the Pink Pastor, and today we're going to talk about where is God when shit goes sideways? Where is God when the bad things happen? But before we even get into that, I want to remind you to like, subscribe, comment, and or hit the notification bell so you know when new videos come up. All of these are things that help me. They help me to understand what people are watching, what people want, what people found value in, so I can repeat that sort of content as time goes forward. Also, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Gmail. Where is God when shit goes sideways? Bad things happen in the world. People get hurt and killed. Property gets damaged. Things just go badly sometimes. At the moment that I'm videoing this, we're in a global pandemic known as COVID-19. We just heard that 200,000 people have died of this. It's killing people. And we can feel very much helpless watching the news, and we can want to know that there's somebody or something out there that can swoop in and make it all better. It's not irrational to ask the question, where is God? Especially knowing that each of us needs that divine more now than ever. I've bore witness to an earthquake in Ecuador. It leveled cities, killed hundreds, and the question on everybody's mind the next morning is, where was God in that moment? I was on the south shore of Long Island for Hurricane Sandy at a congregation. While my parish only lost a few houses to Sandy, I know of congregations where they lost 50 houses in the congregation. A friend of mine, the church itself was underwater. My wife was out in the hurricane running around on an ambulance for most of the time that the hurricane was happening. She was part of the rescue effort. It's not irrational in any of this to ask, where is God in the midst of this kind of destruction? And we were on Long Island. There was destruction in New York City, there was destruction in New Jersey, there was destruction further south and further north. It's not irrational to ask, where is God in the midst of this? I was also on Long Island for 9/11, a national tragedy, but a personal tragedy for those in the New York metro area. People wanted to know, where is God for me on this day? We got to watch on live TV as thousands of people died at the hand of other people claiming to do the work of God. The God they claimed to follow was the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac and Joseph, the God that Christians worship, the God that Muslims worship. And yet it looked nothing like the God that we know. So where was God in that moment? Taking hands-off approach or guiding the airplane? Or none of the above. While we're on the topic, where was God when my wife had hemiplegic migraines? This last time, which was not the first time, she had 2 hemiplegic migraines over the course of 35 days. She spent 5 days in a hospital. She spent 30 days in an acute rehab because her left side was paralyzed and she couldn't speak, she couldn't walk, she couldn't take care of herself. And as I noted, this was not the first time, but in fact, the second time she'd end up in the hospital for this. Where was God? For the sake of brevity, I'm not going to relay every story that relates to this topic in my mind. So my first response is that God is not the author of every little jot and tittle, if you will. If you believe that we have free will, or the ability to make decisions, then in fact, we are responsible for those decisions. Some of them can be pretty horrific. Some of them can be pretty awesome. But the fact that we believe in some level of personal autonomy is spoken to by the fact that we have a court system, that we can be held responsible for our actions. So not do we believe that God controls every little jot and tittle. That's the nature of free will. God remains only tangentially, by virtue of having created us, responsible for what happened. So who was responsible when the hurricane hit and took out the nuclear reactor in Fukushima Japan. I mean, we could argue that there were people responsible. We could talk about the designers, we could talk about the people running the plant, we could talk about all this stuff. We could talk about the hurricane, the typhoon. Did God guide the typhoon to Fukushima because something had happened? I don't think so. Much like I don't think that God is punishing my wife and I for anything. Much like I don't think God was punishing the entirety of New York City and Long Island and New Jersey for anything in Sandy. Much like I don't think God was the author of 9/11. God isn't the right answer. And the really unsatisfying part about that is that there's no one single entity or person we can blame for most of this stuff. So understand this. If we assume that God is in charge of every little detail, then we are assuming that God created Hitler and Mussolini and directed all of their acts, all of the atrocities that they created. And in this case, if we think of the Jewish people, which biblically are the chosen people, they are God's people, then you would also be saying that they had so abandoned God. Oh, wait a minute, God's in charge of every jot and tittle. They couldn't have abandoned God unless God made them abandon God. And so Hitler was in charge of nearly annihilating God's chosen people. I don't think that points to God, who we, at the very simplest, talk about. God is love. It's not a loving action. Enough about showing you why I don't think God is in charge of those things, or that we might be looking in the wrong place to find God in these moments. I think I have an answer which is going to be reassuring to you, though. Because my answer for where is God when shit goes sideways is very simply that God is walking with us. God is supporting us. God is crying with us. God may be giving us a shoulder to cry on. God may be giving us the strength to walk through the ordeal that we have in front of us. Doesn't mean God was in charge of it or author of it. Sometimes just things go badly. I think that's really the story of Jesus in so many ways. God came in form incarnate to walk alongside of us, to know our plight, to be able to understand what happens to us, and through that very human experience, to be able to go with us in all that we do. Yes, God is there to celebrate with us when we get married, or when we have a baby, or when we get a promotion at work. And God is there to comfort us and hold us up when things are going badly, when loved ones are in the hospital, or when natural disaster has struck. God still takes bodily form sometimes. You see, because God might be that person who came to you in the midst of your worst. That might be the angel you needed. Maybe there was a person to literally walk with you through those moments. Maybe prayer was what you needed. So there is this passage, and I want to get into it because both in the King James and in the NRSV, it says all things work together for good. And I've heard this often interpreted as, well, God does all things because they need to happen, and they need to happen for some reason we can't fathom, but in fact they will serve the good in the end. So the Holocaust was for the better. Sandy was for the better. Irene was for the better. All of these things happened because they needed to happen for some grand purpose we cannot understand. You know, translation is an interesting game. And these aren't bad translations. Although when we extend it to this other understanding, I think that is a problem. But when I read the Greek, I read much more, God will bring good things from all that happens. God will bring good from many of the things that happen to us, and then works all things for the good. So this is that a child dies. It's awful. It's tragic. It's There's no way to redeem it as something good. But maybe that's what inspires the parent to start a charity. Maybe the charity then ultimately funds a cure for the disease. Doesn't bring the child back, doesn't make their death any less tragic. It's not that God will make everything good or that God does everything for some good purpose. Child dies, it's awful, it's tragic. But it inspires the parents to start a charity, and that charity brings about a cure for the disease, and the child's death became the inspiration for that piece that is good. You see, it's not that it makes the child's death good. It's not that it makes everything okay. But some good did come out of the negative that was occurring. How about the teenager who dies in a high school shooting, or the multiple teenagers who die in a high school shooting, but that births a movement amongst their peers who then get politically motivated and active to change laws to try and make sure this doesn't happen again. Still a tragic event. We still don't want to see teenagers dying. We still don't want to see this happen again, but some good could be brought out of it anyhow. Lots of the best things that have happened in the world are responses to awful things that happened. Post-hurricane in New Orleans, when it flooded downtown, they built a team that could de-water. Literally a team that could pump out entire areas. And because of that, then when Sandy came around, they were able to pump out the subway system because they had the tools and the resources and the people in place to do it. Doesn't undo the destruction that happened in Katrina, but it does mean some good came out of it. Lots of the best things that have happened in this world are responses to awful things that happened. It doesn't make the original event less good or less tragic or less evil or less awful. It does mean that there can still be redemption and the strength to stand up and to bring about the good that might be possible. That's where I see God at work. That's where I see God in the world. So where is God when shit goes sideways? Sitting right next to you, holding you up, comforting you, prodding you to do the right thing sometimes, maybe even spurring a thought in your head. God is the comforter, the redeemer, not the excuse to do anything you want without consequence. One final note, I want to point out that God often comes again in bodily form. That person who stands with you by the side of the hospital bed, they may well be the presence of God in that moment. They may be the hand you needed. They may be the thing that gets you through. What inspired them to be there? What gave them the strength to support you? What if God supported them and they supported you? Which by implication means that we were at all times the hand, the shoulder, or the voice of God for others. I'll speak more about this over time, but when asking where is God, I simply suggest to you God is with you, walking next to you, helping you, supporting you, comforting you in everything you do, even when things are going badly. God will not abandon nor forsake you, no matter how bad the situation. Thank you.